constitutional traditions of the Member States. And the essence of democracy is that citizens can freely express their views and participate in the democratic life, choose their political representatives by exercising their voting rights, and more generally, have a say about their future. Citizens should be able to form their own opinions in a public space where there is access to reliable information from a plurality of sources, where different views can be expressed, where political discussions can be confronted, and where it is possible to disagree with one another. Civil society organisations, as well as free, pluralistic and independent media, play a vital role in the system of democratic checks and balances. They are also vital for keeping under scrutiny those who are in power. The Commission has consistently emphasised the need to foster an enabling environment for civil society as being so important for our democracies. This is an environment that supports strong, independent and pluralistic civil society and defends its role and ability to act as a watchdog for our collective democracy. Actions deliberately aimed at shrinking the capacity of action of civil society organisations or that delegitimise or stigmatise their work must be strongly condemned by all. I now turn to the most recent developments in Hungary, and notably the recent draft law entitled Transparency in Public Life. Transparency and accountability are important values in a democracy. All democratic actors should be bound to respect these values. At the same time, transparency and accountability should not be misused to restrict the civic space or create undue limitations to fundamental freedoms, such as the freedom of expression or the freedom of association. And I would like to recall that in 2017, the Commission initiated an infringement procedure as regards a Hungarian law imposing obligations on foreign-funded civil society organisations restricting their freedom of association. And in June of 2020, the European Court of Justice ruled in favour of the Commission in that particular infringement case. And following that ruling, Hungary repealed the law and the restrictions it had imposed and introduced new measures on the transparency of civil society organisations. And the Commission has kept monitoring the implementation of this new law and its impact very closely ever since then. In autumn of last year, the Commission referred Hungary to the Court of Justice because it considers the law adopted in December 2023 establishing the Sovereignty Office and its investigative activities to be in breach of EU law. The Commission considers that the law breaches internal market fundamental freedoms, several charter rights, including the freedom of association, and EU data protection legislation. The law entrusts the Office with a very broad discretion concerning investigations, notably on access to information, empowering the Office to intervene in an intrusive manner in investigations. It requires extensive publicity about the individual investigations and their findings, potentially having a stigmatising effect. This case is now pending at the Court of Justice of the European Union and, upon the Commission's request, is being treated in an expedited procedure. Honourable Members, we are now looking closely at the most recent draft law tabled in the Hungarian National Assembly entitled Transparency in Public Life. We are examining the impact that it might have on civil society, both in relation to restrictions to funding as regards the activities also of the Sovereignty Protection Office. And while we need to follow the evolution of this draft in the Hungarian National Assembly, there are several provisions in the draft that raise concern, as they appear to impose significant restrictions and consequences on entities receiving foreign funding as identified by the Sovereignty Office. I want to assure you that these developments have our full attention. The Commission is looking at them closely and will not hesitate to take steps as necessary to safeguard European Union law, including fundamental freedoms and fundamental rights under the treaties and under our Charter. Other developments concern recent amendments to Hungarian law prohibiting the organisation and participation to an assembly that violates the so-called Child Protection Act of 2021. I already had the opportunity to talk about this law with you in the April plenary session, and let me stress that our union is one of freedom and equality. Everyone should be able to be who they are, to live and to love freely. The right to gather peacefully is enshrined in the Charter and is a core element of our democracies. The restriction on the right to peaceful assembly is not the only matter of concern raised by this law. We are looking at the law from different angles and the implications that the amendments may have on obligations under EU law, both in relation to data protection and also in terms of privacy. And I want to recall that the Commission already brought an infringement case against Hungary on the child protection law. And let me also underline that in the two ongoing infringement proceedings that I mentioned, the Parliament, as well as a large number of Member States, are supporting the Commission before the Court. Beyond these two specific legislative developments, the Commission is following the overall situation in Hungary in relation to rule of law in its annual rule of law report, and we are currently preparing its next edition, which is due in July. And finally, as colleagues will know, at the end of March I was in Budapest, my first visit as Commissioner, to engage in dialogue with representatives of the government, judicial authorities, media and other stakeholders. And since then, I can assure you that we are continuously following the latest developments in Hungary, and I look forward to listening very carefully to the views of this House. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McGrath. And we will now take the first round of speakers on behalf of the political groups, starting with Mr. Tarr for 2 minutes and representing EPP. The floor is yours.
Tisztelt elnök asszony, tisztelt biztos úr, tisztelt
President and Commissioner, Minister, thank you for being here. Against our will and despite our opposition, yet another anti-democratic piece of legislation under the Orban government, the law on transparency, has seen the light of day. There's more and more people now are wanting change, and this is why Orban is trying to make these measures stricter. We're not talking about child protection and protecting them against paedophiles, but we've seen that our country is losing funds because of corruption. They talk about peace, but we know that they're preparing for war. Recently, we have seen very clearly that the citizens have been disavowed, and we have this draft law, the bill that's been submitted, and obviously what Orban is doing is trying to detract attention from the economic crisis. So this law on transparency is just another Putin-style measure so that the friends of Fidesz can ban journalists, etc., without any justification for this. And the objective of the new law is to silence critical voices and to intimidate. And if it is adopted, if it is successful, it will jeopardize the elections, forthcoming elections. And the Prime Minister is trying to spread fear and do away with resistance. People are fed up, and there are more and more people now who realize that change is necessary. We're peaceful, we want peace, but in a very clear way. And I was delighted to hear the words of Commissioner McGrath, and what we're asking for is that they do really take a look at what's going on in Hungary, and that the Commission do what is necessary, because what is at stake is the freedom and peace of the people Obviously, one can be indignant, but that is not enough. We need action.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Molnar, 1.5 minutes on behalf of the S&D Group, please.
Tisztelt képviselőtársaim, a magyar kormány azt gondolja, hogy...
Colleagues, the Hungarian government thinks that the problem is the fact that journalists write about the problems. And so this transparency bill is in line with what Putin does, trying to shut up journalists and members of civil society. Can you start a procedure against everyone who is against your ideology? If you're not a friend of Putin, then the procedure starts. If you don't believe in the state, then the same thing happens. If you want to recognise LGBTQ rights or anyone who comes from abroad, if they've never lived in the country, then they seem to be criminals. If they come to Hungary, they'll be fine. So, colleagues, is this really happening in the EU? It might seem a strange question to ask here in the Parliament, but let's think about if you can do something like this, if it's possible to ban the free press and all opposing opinions, then this can be done to all European citizens. What is done in one member state will eventually come to be done in all member states, depending on which political winds blow. So, does the EU want to protect its citizens? It shouldn't be Orban allowing these types of procedures against people who see things differently, but it should be the EU opening a procedure against the Hungarian government. Because we have to respect also Hungarian citizens within the EU. Thank you.
On behalf of PFE, Mr. Dimitar for 2 minutes, please.
Örülök, hogy végre lehet vitatkozni az
Well, I'm pleased to see that we're talking about transparency here in this room, because it's not always the case in this House. Why is this so topical? What was the prehistory of this debate? Well, the European Commission, like US aid, has a system for distributing money to left liberal activist groups. They provide these groups with money, and then they carry out political lobbying. 37,000 contracts have been signed to a value of 17 billion euros. And on the list of organizations that are supported by the Commission are organizations that lobby against the interests of farmers or who drag my home country through the dirt. And in many cases, they support the political campaigns of the parties that you've just heard from before me. Well, you've heard that Mr. Verhofstadt's civil society organisation has received money. Fact-checking censors have been supported too. In the last electoral campaign, we saw that 132 million euros were spent. What's being proposed here has got absolutely nothing to do with civil society. Civil society is built from below. No, these organisations are steered by large international organizations like the Open Society Foundation or USAID. So the question is, how free is an organization that without money from the Commission or American Democrats cannot afford to function? You can see that American laws are much stricter, and that is an approach that has been successful. So I call upon the Commission to talk about not only the civil society organizations that are supported, but also the media. And then you can draw the necessary conclusions.
The next speaker is Mr. Jaki on behalf of ECR for 1.5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you very much, President, Commissioner. Let's call a spade, because you're talking about this initiative. And what about all of those citizens who haven't a clue about what you're talking about? Millions of euro spent on civil society organizations. And then you have politicians who carry out illegal campaigns. We've got Qatargate, for example, where we saw there was an organization and then organizations underlying the rule of law in Poland, all linked to the Qatargate. And I think we've seen the most expensive campaign on Facebook in my country, which was financed from outside, by people from outside. People who weren't paying taxes weren't registered anywhere. And this is a total scandal. The idea is to show people how this mechanism works. And we've seen that there was one party that took all the funding from one budget, and then another political party is being illegally funded from outside the country in its sector. So this has nothing to do with the civil society. This is all political in nature. And now you're taking an example, Hungary is an example. So let's see proper transparency, transparency, transparency.
Vice President Wilmers for 1.5 minutes on behalf of Renew.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, it's quite interesting because what we heard about earlier in the debate is exactly what we saw when we went to Hungary on mission. I put together legitimate questions about a whole series of about legislation, and the Hungarian government didn't want to respond but to attack us. So that's a direct example. We experienced that for 3 days that we were in Hungary. And so, colleagues, I'm starting to wonder whether this type of response derives from the fact that people aren't necessarily comfortable with the laws that they're voting on. The Parliament is being asked to vote upon a law that would basically mean the end of any media that criticises the government. It's been called transparency in public life, in quote marks, but of course it's not transparency, it's censorship. You know that you can't if you can't express any opposing opinion, then this is no longer a democracy. In Hungary, the media organisations are very clear. If this law passes, then they can just shut up shop. Now, the Commission has to take provisional measures to try to prevent irreversible damage, also undertake an infringement procedure without delay. And Mr. McGrath, you said that the Commission won't hesitate to do so. We'll be keeping an eye on that. I want to ask you, how many further transgressions do we have to come here and speak out against before the punitive side of Article 7 is actually enacted? If we tolerate what's happening in Hungary today, then the message we're sending out is that tomorrow anyone else will be able to ignore our democratic principles without any consequence. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Ms. Reinke for 1.5 minutes on behalf of the Greens, please.
Thank you, Chair, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. The situation of democracy in Hungary is unbearable. And this is actually not news, because already in 2018, the European Parliament triggered the Article 7 procedure to protect rule of law, democracy and fundamental rights in Hungary. And almost 7 years have passed since then. And things have continuously gotten worse in this period of time. And they are still getting worse as we speak. Hungary recently banned pride marches in an attempt to make queer people disappear. Well, here's to you, Viktor Orban. We exist. We exist all over Europe, and we also exist in Hungary, and we will not go away. Now the Hungarian draft bill on foreign funding, if adopted, that will take control and in fact suspend the work of independent NGOs and media. And actually, I think what this shows is that ahead of the election, Orban is already trying to transform Hungary into more and more of a Russian-style autocracy. And the reason for that is that he's scared. Colleagues, we cannot let this happen. We call on the European Commission as the guardian of the treaties to act and to do more, to accelerate the already existing infringement procedures, to finally apply interim measures against the Hungarian government, and to close any loophole that could be used by Hungary to rechannel frozen funding without having implemented reforms. Time to act is now. In fact, it is long overdue. We have to stop Orban and his friends from silencing Hungarian voices, from discriminating against Hungarians, from stealing money from Hungarian citizens. We stand with the Hungarian people and the Hungarian democracy, and that is why we stand up against Viktor Orban, also on the 28th of June at Budapest Pride. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Mr. Ivanitis for 1 minute on behalf of the Left Group, please.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the first time and unfortunately won't be the last time that we will have to discuss Mr. Orban's government that in an authoritarian way is moving away from democratic principles. And when we do not act against it, this is the result. They've banned the pride parades. They have launched offensive against sensitive and vulnerable groups. Yesterday, they announced that they will move away from the International Court. So the Orban government has proven that they want to tear the Hungarian democracy to shreds. So this is a fully open anti-democratic policy, and it moves against the EU. So we need to launch a new infringement procedure. We need to stop giving them funds. And Orban should not participate in European decisions.
Boivendek for 1 minute on behalf of ESN Group, please.
We all welcomed it when an election was cancelled in Romania because of foreign interference. Everybody was annoyed and angry when X was supporting the AfD in Germany. And now we have a member state that is trying to build transparency in the area of civil society organizations to prevent foreign interference. Again, it's the usual double standards. If we want to reveal the efforts of the globalist mainstream, then we're just called a dictatorship. The question is whether we can defend the sovereignty of our state. The globalist forces are all getting very excited about this, as if we have put the finger in the wound to really shown where these double standards are. If you look at what goes on Meta, there is censorship going on, and that is having a major impact on freedom of opinion in my country. And that is also going to have an impact on the coming elections in my country. We have to work against it, because Hungary shall always be free.
On behalf of the political groups, I will now open up for the blue card option, and I will announce that I will be a little bit stricter on the time, so please try to stick to speaking time. And the next speaker is Mr. Linares for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, we are here today not to simply debate a single piece of legislation, but to recognise a pattern, a deliberate and escalating erosion of democratic norms in Hungary. The recently proposed transparency law is not an isolated development. It is part of a wider strategy that actually reflects something new and hopeful in a way. Because for the first time in over a decade, Viktor Orban is facing a democratic opposition that is both capable and credible, a real threat to his hold on power. And his response is not competition or dialogue, it is repression. The draft law claims to defend national sovereignty In reality, it undermines the democratic foundations it pretends to protect. It gives Orban allies in the Sovereignty Protection Office sweeping powers, operating in opacity and without judicial oversight, an institutional black box designed to intimidate, surveil and silence dissent. And we have seen signs of this approach before: the stigmatization of civil society, the capture of the media, the hollowing out of independent institutions. But this is a further step, one that signals Orban's desperation to criminalize opposition instead of just suppressing and marginalizing it. And let us be clear, this is not about sovereignty, this is about control, and it is about survival of a regime increasingly anxious about losing the support of its people. And after years of echoing and enabling the Kremlin, Orban is now copying its playbook more directly. This law is not only undemocratic, it is un-European. And the European Union must respond with clarity and resolve. We must ensure that democratic rights in Hungary are not just theoretical, but fully exercisable, freely, fairly, and without fear. This is not just a Hungarian matter, it is a European one, because if we fail to act when democracy is tested, we invite others to do the same. Let us stand with the Hungarian people, not just in words, but in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Linares. There is a blue card. There is a blue card from Mr. Jungblut. Do you want to take it? Please, seat 646.
Vielen Dank. Sie haben hier.
Thank you very much.
Sie haben hier darüber.
Well, we've heard some fantasies about Hungary threatening the opposition. My question is, you're an EPP member, so you're one of the members of Merkel's CDU, basically. And in Germany, the biggest opposition party in surveys, the AfD, is currently under surveillance by the security services. There are people who are losing their jobs because they're members of the AfD. There are people in the CDU in Germany who are trying to repress the largest opposition party in Germany, trying to ban the party. So isn't that a bigger attack on democracy than your fantasies about Hungary?
Blue card is 30 seconds, and you have 30 seconds to reply, please.
Well, thank you. I think the colleague fails to understand that this today is a debate about Hungary and not about Germany. And the big difference between Germany and Hungary is that Germany at this moment has a functioning rule of law with independent institutions free from political control. And I would like to invite you to try and help us to achieve the same in Hungary. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Mendes for 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Colleagues, Commissioner. Well, I think the question that we have to be asking today is, how many more violations of the rule of law does Mr. Orban need to commit before we act? Well, 7 years ago, we were saying we need conditionality to apply Article 7, but it's been constantly disrespected by Mr. Orban. What we're seeing once again is another attack on the rule of law. The attempt is to try and silence and prevent the essential work of the civil society organizations, the work that they have to do to keep democracy strong. So, Commissioner, I listened attentively to your introductory remarks, and I have seen what you've been doing. I've got trust in you, but please, Article 7 has to apply in this case. We have to prevent the attacks on democracy being committed by Hungary. Allow me to just make one more comment. If we respond with silence and inaction to what's going on in Hungary, a member state of the EU, then we are simply feeding in to the discourse of those people around the world who are trying to silence democracy. So please, Commissioner, apply Article 7 of our treaty. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Wilimski for 1.5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in certain situations, they're so unreal, and they happen very rarely. And today we have a situation. We've got the Pfizer scandal. 35 billion euro was spent by the President of the Commission to place orders, and now we have a Court of Justice ruling for her to reveal the text messages, and nobody seems to be bothered about that. And then a Chinese mobile telecommunications company, which seems nobody seems to be interested in that either. And for the past 2 years, there's been the Qatar scandal, where bundles of money were distributed towards the Social Democrats, to assistants, MEPs, and nobody seems to be interested in that either. That's being swept under the carpet. And today, you get back to your pet subject and start discussing this again and have another go at the Hungarians. What have the Hungarians done? What has Orban done? Is it because Orban has the majority of his population behind him? We're talking about freedom, democracy. He says he's against war. Does that bother you as well? Just stop it. It's perfectly legitimate for a state to say that they wish to oppose foreign influence, especially when it comes to future elections. And they want to create transparency and democracy, which is important for free elections. I think Viktor Orban is going to win these elections, not because he's a political partner of ours, because he is the path of freedom. Speaker has been interrupted.
On the speaking time, so that's why I interrupted. I prefer not to do it, so please stick to it. The next speaker is Mr. Kavidagna for 1 minute, please.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. In Hungary, democracy belongs to the people, as it should in all European countries. Now, we know that these buildings have been affected by a number of scandals, from Cattergate, where it's shown that sovereign states have undermined our democracy, and inquiries are underway into that. In Hungary, we hear that millions of dollars arrive every year and end up in the pockets of NGOs who oppose the government. Now you're asking us to put an end to laws voted on by the Hungarian people, but at the same time you call for transparency. And it's you who vote for full transparency for goods coming into our economic area. So this is double standards. You ask for transparency in some areas, but not about resources that ends up in the pockets of politicians. We want to see transparency, and we want to see, above all, equality.
Grazie, onorevole. Our next speaker is Madame Keller.
Commissioner Michael McGrath. President, I see the Minister isn't here right now. Colleagues, many of us have said the same thing today. Hungary has been under Article 7 since 2018. Viktor Orban's government is afraid of nothing. It continues to restrict the freedoms and liberties of its citizens, the fundamental values of the EU under threat. There has been one alert after the other, and nothing has happened. Hungary still has its right to a veto and its right to vote in the Council. When can we count upon the penalties under Article 7 being applied? That's to say, suspending Hungary's right to vote. More than ever, Europe is facing threats from Russia, from the US. We cannot have one member state that is close to Russia and endangers our defense and unity. So I call upon the Council and the Commission to take their courage in their hands and act. Thank you.
Merci, Questor Keller. Our next speaker is Madame Strick.
Dear Chair, Council, Commissioner, the end of all critical voices in Hungary That's what Orban's foreign agent bill could mean. How cynical! Under the guise of fighting foreign interference, he is importing Russian-style repression into the EU, eradicating all actors who promote the values and rights of the European community, of which Hungary is a member. A membership that comes with obligations and loyalty. The bill flagrantly violates not only many EU laws, like on media and money laundering, but first and foremost, the fundamental rights and democratic principles of our Union. It will destroy all checks and balances that are vital in a healthy democracy. And when the law enters into force, any targeted entity can be bankrupted within days. So the EU needs to stop this now. As a rapporteur on the rule of law of Hungary, I call on the Commission to request interim measures in the ongoing SPO case, to sue for non-compliance of the Lex NGO judgment, and to start a new infringement procedure with interim measures. And Council, I expect from you a very clear stance during their hearing on Hungary next Tuesday, but also serious consequences for a government that acts so blatantly against EU laws and values. Impunity is poison. We cannot allow Orban to wipe out Hungary's civil society and independent media, and we have no time to lose, as every day counts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Mr. Vadrekevich, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, a week ago, a draft bill on the so-called the transparency of public life targeting foreign-funded NGOs was published by the Hungarian Parliament. This is another scandal. This is another attack on European values. It is very similar to laws adopted by authoritarian states, including Russia, and it is intended to block any independent voices against the Orban's regime. Let us be clear, if this law comes into force, it would risk draconic penalties for Hungarian freedom fighters. This law follows the defense of sovereignty law, which is already the subject of infringement procedure by the European Commission, now proceeded in the Court of Justice. I fully agree with what Commissioner McGrath said. The freedom of speech is the essence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Smisek, you have the floor.
Under the very nice-sounding name, protection of transparency, they're trying to push through things that seem to remind us of Russian foreign agents. This is a law which talks about transparency of protection of sovereignty and public transparency. And it's not that at all. And in line with the law, any organisation which indirectly gets foreign support and, point out, even EU funds could find itself threatened by this office and be the subject of repression. The Sovereignty Office is going to be entitled to draw up a black list and the Treasury to seize the activities of any unwanted organisation. Orban is selling himself to Moscow and Putin, and the fight against disinformation, he's not doing that in his own country, and I'd like to call upon the Commission to introduce all necessary procedures and interim measures, because I think that obviously the European Union has to stand behind all those fighting for freedom in Hungary.
We're talking about tax on transparency. If you look at what's happening with Pfizer and von der Leyen, Huawei, Qatar, a whole number of areas. And now it's a scandal that most of this parliament wants to intervene in Hungarian affairs. The Liberals, the Socialists, the Greens, they're all the same. They all vote the same. They are trying to undermine the only genuinely conservative sovereign government in Europe, like the one that we had in Poland 2 years ago. More European public money goes to Hungarian NGOs, but they're not Hungarian. They're financed by Berlin or Paris or the United States. Now, the elections in Poland in 2022 were a waste of time. You have you have Donald Tusk, who's in power, and you just want to have someone who will be like him and obedient in Budapest. I think the decision should be left up to the Hungarian people.
Muchas gracias, señor Terz. Mr. Connor, you have the floor.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen,
colleagues, what are we still waiting for? What is the Commission waiting for? What are the Member States waiting for? What still has to happen before we get some action? The rule of law has been abolished. The independence of the judiciary, abolished. The OEC supporting Putin with troops? I mean, when are we finally going to get a bit of action? When are we going to put an end to this? This is taxpayers' money. We have to say, no more money for Viktor Orban's regime. If you don't support European values, then you should get zero money from the EU budget.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Freud, you have the floor. A strong speech, wasn't it? Do you mind to take the floor in those conditions?
Dear colleagues, Commissioner McGrath, I think this is a decisive moment for the rule of law. What Trump is doing in the US, unfortunately, is emboldening dictators around the world, including Orban. Your Commission froze funding for Hungary 2.5 years ago. You had negotiated 27 reforms that are necessary. Not a single one has been delivered in these 2.5 years. Zero reforms. And instead, we see further attacks almost weekly by now. The Integrity Authority is being bullied. There are further attacks on the judiciary. The last reform that was implemented under the loud protest of the Judges Association. There are restrictions on the freedom of assembly, and now this attack, further attack on civil society. I don't really understand what we're waiting for. Are we waiting for Orban also imitating Putin, that opposition politicians start falling out of windows? Because that, I fear, is not far away. He is imitating everything that Putin is doing, so who knows? I cannot explain to citizens why we're still sending billions to this country. We wrote you a letter this morning, cross-party. It's time to freeze all this money until the corruption stops and the attacks on fundamental freedom stop. Thank you very much.
Mr. Freud, you have a blue card coming from Mr. Laszlo from Patriots. Do you accept it? Do you accept it?
Yes.
Okay. Please, Mr. Laszlo, you have the floor.
Mr. Freund, in 2024 October, you were in Washington negotiating with USAID. What was the subject?
Mr. Freund.
Well, I had a couple of meetings talking with USAID and other officials of the then US administration about the situation in your country. That you, your party, your political allies, the family of Viktor Orban are stealing billions. And where is this money going? You're taking private jets to the Maldives, you're buying luxury yachts, you're turning old king's palaces into golf courts, you're stealing billions of euros from Hungarian citizens that have no functioning hospitals, that have schools that are falling apart. Where is all the stolen money? That's what we were talking about in Washington.
Thank you, dear colleague. Madame Wiesler-Lima, you have the floor.
I am waiting impatiently for the day when I can stand in front of you and be satisfied that Hungary is once more on the path of democracy. Unfortunately, it's not going to be today, and quite the contrary. If we take a look at the draft law on transparency in public life, the Hungarian government has crossed yet another red line by targeting free media and organisations under the pretext of foreign funding. Hungary is following the same model of Russian repression. Even European funds that would be suspicious under this new law, which is completely ridiculous. A law of this kind is totally incompatible with the values and principles of European law, because it is muzzling freedom of expression and independent journalism. Recent surveys have shown that the opposition party is way ahead of Fidesz, and it's only being afraid of NGOs and freedom of expression that explains what lies behind this law. So what we have to do is what they're trying to do is to block access to free and diversified information. And this goes hand in hand with the maintenance of the state of emergency in the country. These are desperate attempts to try and avoid a resounding failure. The future elections have to take place in a climate of equity and freedom, and this is what we defend, and this is what we're going to be fighting for. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Wiesler-Lima. Madame Pierre.
I naively thought that the European Union had finally understood the need to guarantee transparency in political life after the innumerable corruption scandals that have affected the institutions, Qatargate, Pfizergate, all the Green Deal affairs, Huawei. But you seem to be against this Hungarian law that legitimately wants to look at financing for NGOs and associations. And in doing this, you prove that the opposite is true. Why are you so aggressive when a sovereign country wants transparency? Why are NGOs so afraid to show who finances them? What are they hiding? The European institutions are experiencing the gangrene of generalized corruption and rather obscure funding for civil society. The European Union hasn't got any lessons to teach anybody else on this topic. So please clean your own house first and allow sovereign people to democratically decide upon their own laws.
Pierre, Mr. Brandstadter.
Thank you, Mr. President. How I love these strong men, really strong men, autocrats, when they are trembling. And now I see Mr. Orban is trembling. He's afraid of the situation. But what's the situation? He says it's about transparency. He wants more transparency. Okay, let's have more transparency about corruption. Let's have more transparency. What do you do with the money? Let's have transparency. Why is his family so rich? Why are his friends so rich? Open the coffers. Tell us where the money is from. It's from our taxpayers. Of course, we know that. So what he's afraid of? He's afraid of that his political business plan doesn't work anymore. The political plan to have a majority by suppressing the media and oppressing the public mind. And the business plan by making money with our taxpayers' money. And one more thing. He says that his opponents are bugs. Animals. He says that political activists must be liquidated. People who talk like this have nothing to do in our European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Laszlo, you have the floor.
Biztos úr, sajnos fogalma sincsen arról.
Commissioner, unfortunately, you've got no idea of what's really happening here. Since 2017, the EU could have had this law withdrawn, because at that time there was a Hungarian intervention in the Hungarian elections. Don't you know the history here? You can't simply forget about the foreign interference from Soros, who spent 8 million on the left-wing liberals, 2 million from a Swiss bank account, 35 million from the Biden government through US aid. They are trying to exert political influence in Central Europe. These are clear corrupt cases, and the new American government has recognized that. Thanks to the Trump administration, these programs have been revealed and stopped. They have revealed this left liberal corruption. We've had enough of foreign interference, and it's now time to put an end to that.
I have 8 requests for the Catch the Eye, and I'm going to accept all of them. First place, el señor Juan Fernando López Aguilar. Señor López Aguilar, el micrófono, por favor.
Microphone, please.
Gracias, President.
Yes, thank you. President, Commissioner McGrath, we've had very many debates and resolutions on this subject, on the flagrant violations of Viktor Orban's government of European law and the Charter of Fundamental Rights, starting off with the principle of non-discrimination. I think we have to focus on his repression of journalism, LGBT rights, and then his favorism for Putin and everything to do with the coalition of the willing. And I think what's crowned all of this is that Hungary is the first member state of the European Union that has withdrawn itself from the ICC because, of course, there is this arrest warrant that has been issued against Mr. Netanyahu, and Hungary's withdrawn in order not to implement that. So we have infringement proceedings, rulings from the Court of Justice. None of these cow Viktor Orban. The only thing we have, Article 7, is like and its provisions, and the Commission is asking Council. Well, what they could do is to withdraw Hungary's voting rights. That would work as well. Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez, seat 643.
Monsieur le Président, je suis très choqué par l'intitulé.
President, I'm shocked by the title of this debate. Do you think it's correct that you should stigmatise a member state, Hungary? This is unfair, unacceptable behaviour towards a member state. What message do you think we are sending out to the international community? China, the USA must be laughing. You just don't like it when people don't think like you. How are you saying that Hungary is undermining democracy? In which country was an election annulled and then the winner refused to come and appear? Was that Hungary? No, it was Romania. And what about Mrs. Wilmers? Now we hear that there. It was in France where laws are being invoked that are almost never used. Mr. Orban is a free man who defends the family and his people against interference and immigration. He rejects some of your ideas, and yet he remains standing. You want to undermine him. You don't like the fact that he won't submit. You have no principles. You have no honour. You need to put an end to this shameful masquerade.
Merci, chers collègues. Our next speaker, Mr. Tinkinen, seat 204.
Puhemies, Unkarissa on suunnitteilla hyvin huolestuttava laki.
Now, I'm very worried about what's happening in Hungary. Hungary is accused of applying disproportionate fines on those organizations receiving money from foreign bodies, including the EU. Well, does that sound familiar to you? In Russia, you have a similar law, the Foreign Agents Law. It seems that Putin inspired this law. It is not something that comes from Europe. And there are a number of worrying developments in Hungary, as we all know. Criticism of the EU by a member state is no reason to freeze EU funds. However, serious measures are being taken to undermine democracy, and we cannot simply watch this happen.
Nuestro siguiente orador es el señor Asens, seat 283.
Thank you. Mr. Orban persecutes anybody he feels is an enemy of the regime, immigrants, NGOs, LGBT, etc. And now he wants to withdraw from the ICC. And the reason he's doing this is because he and Netanyahu have a common enemy, Muslims. And anti-Semitism seems to relocate because what we have now are the Muslims as a target group. But before we had anti-Semitics, now we've got Islamophobes. And Orban criticised Soros with all the typical stereotypes of a Judeo-Masonic conspiracy. I don't think we should really accept any lesson of anti-Semitism from the far right, because anti-Semitism is in their DNA. Vox, the Spanish party, is still talking about Francoism, which obviously was a great supporter of Nazism.
Next speaker, Mr. Ratsoulis, seat 316.
Chair, Commissioner, I believe that I am the only one in this room who used to be a political prisoner in Soviet times. I was persecuted by the communist ideology. I fought for the independence of my country, and therefore I have this right to compare two ideologies, communist and leftist ideology, which you represent. And I believe that this system is atrocious. When Hungarian Prime Minister Orban is trying to defend the families of his people from your ideology, why have you disrupted my speech?
The microphone so we will be able to hear you better. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Madame Iacovici Sosoaka.
I still have 20 seconds, I believe. My speech has been cut off. I wanted to say that I have a right to compare these two systems. My blood is boiling. I am here in the European Parliament, the last Soviet prisoner. I feel as if I were in the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, in the Soviet Parliament, those who were speaking against the communist power, they were persecuted.
Sorry for the time you had. It was true. For the next time, please don't touch the micro. Madame Ianovici Sosoaka, you have the floor.
I will speak Romanian.
You are talking about Hungary. You dare to make remarks to a state. Why don't you kick out from the EU? Dare you? Why not kick out Hungary and Romania out from the EU? No longer to have access to the Black Sea and no longer to have NATO bases. And let us alone. Why dare you to crush the independence and sovereignty of a country? All treaties are signed as independent and sovereign states. Who are you who have installed censorship and dictatorship worse than in fascism? Who are you to make remarks to Orban? Bravo to him for having banned all these parades of promiscuity and lack of respect to the children. God made Adam and Eve, and not Adam and Adam. Bravo to Orban for doing what he's doing, order and discipline in his country, based upon the tradition. He said, you don't like us, kick us out, but don't sanction us where you are the first who have violated the European legislation.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Jungbluth, seat 646.
Herr Präsident, wir hätten heute über viele
Well, we could have spoken about a lot of interesting things in Europe today. In Romania, the elections have to be manipulated and repeated until you get the right result. In France, the strongest candidate was excluded from the elections. We could talk about Germany, where the foreign minister, Mr. Rubio, from the US, has spoken about tyranny. But in Hungary, it's a harmless law that we're getting angry about. It's ridiculous. We're just trying to support a party called TISA, which is a party that was created from abroad and is steered by people like Merkel in Germany. If you're in Hungary and you are going to be run by Merkel, then the only thing you can expect is terrorism and mass migration. So good luck with that.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Norvisk, seat 543.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Commissioner and colleagues. It's really extreme to see the smoke screen the far right are trying to throw out over today's debate with their whataboutism. Really funny and extreme. But this is actually a serious matter. It's a serious matter for the citizens of Hungary, for the civil society, researchers, journalists, and the LGBTQI community. And therefore, it's also urgent, dear Commissioner, that we see concrete action from the Commission. It's nice speeches you did today. We have heard a lot of good speeches, but we need to see concrete action. We need to see it urgently. People are demanding it in Hungary, and the civil society cannot hold up unless we are there for them. And I hope also I will see you and your colleagues, together with the rest of us, the 28th of June for the Budapest Pride, to actually show that you mean all the good words you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleague. Commissioner McGrath, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I'd like to thank all of the honourable members for their contributions to this debate this evening. And I have listened carefully to all of the contributions that have been made. And to sum up, from my perspective, serious concerns remain regarding fundamental rights and the rule of law in Hungary. Next week, the Commission will give an update on the situation in Hungary to the General Affairs Council during what is the 8th formal hearing of Hungary under Article 7.1 procedure in the General Affairs Council. And this will be an opportunity to reaffirm that the Commission shares numerous concerns expressed in the reasoned proposal of the European Parliament, and it will allow both Minister Schwabke and I an opportunity to inform ministers of this debate this evening. The Commission believes the Article 7.1 procedure should be maintained as long as the issues that triggered it are not resolved. On the question of civil society, let me reiterate, the Commission places great importance on the role of civil society and remains committed to protecting the freedom of association and fostering a supportive environment for its work across the EU, including in relation to access to funding. And I also want to be clear that nobody needs to be protected from freedom of association. Rather, freedom of association itself needs to be protected in the European Union. Honourable members, respect for rule of law is not an optional extra for member states. It is a core treaty obligation that applies to all member states, and an à la carte approach is not possible. I want to inform the House the Commission is considering its approach to the next MFF, the Multiannual Financial Framework, and we had a further discussion on this issue at yesterday's meeting of the College of Commissioners, and this included consideration of the role of conditionality and respect for rule of law in that regard. Honourable members, let me finally reassure you that the Commission will remain committed in defending the democratic values and fundamental rights, and stands ready to use the tools at its disposal to ensure the full respect of EU values in our European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Commissioner. Minister Slapka, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr.
President, Mr. Commissioner, honourable members, thank you very much for your comments and remarks. Let me assure you that the rule of law and fundamental rights are a key priority for us as a presidency, of course. Our shared EU values can never be taken for granted. They require constant actions for their upholding and strengthening, especially in current geopolitical context. Let me underline once again that the hearing of Hungary is scheduled for the next General Affairs Council meeting next week as a part of the Article 7 procedure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Minister. The debate is closed. Next item on the agenda is Commission Statement, Single Market Strategy. I'm going to give the floor first to Vice President Sejourny.